There's nothing around, just the eternal, endless whiteness of Greenland's snow and cold winds blowing into your face. Nothing hints at the impending catastrophe. You take another step and freeze in horror. An abyss is spreading at your feet, bottomless and dark. If you had made a bigger step, it would have swallowed you. That infamous Greenland's hole. It happened in the middle of the 2010s. A group of geologists were scanning the surface of Greenland's Hiawatha Glacier using radar when they spotted something very, very strange. It was a giant pit, more than 980 feet deep and almost 20 miles wide. That's big enough to fit inside Washington, D.C. or Paris. After staring at their radars for quite a while and scratching their heads, researchers decided to find out what could have made such a huge hole. Could it have been good old erosion? A raging volcano? An asteroid impact? A giant sandworm? Ugh, I might have gone a bit overboard with this worm idea, but you never know with these ancient glaciers. Anyway, in our case, one mystery seemed to lead to another, which had been puzzling scientists for decades. And to solve both of them, scientists needed something super common, but at the same time very important: quartz, one of the most abundant materials in Earth's crust. But before we dig deeper into this topic, let's make a small detour and talk about a pretty bizarre phenomenon called the Younger Dryas event. To see what it was like, we need to go deep into the past, as far back as 12,900 to 11,600 years ago. During that period, the planet became much colder, especially in Europe and North America. Now, let's talk a bit more about that weird climate change in the Northern Hemisphere. There are a few theories. One that involves a change in currents in the Atlantic Ocean. Another speaks about something large kicking tons of dust into the air and effectively blocking sunlight. The two most popular and likely hypotheses mention a volcanic eruption and an asteroid impact. Indeed, there was a volcanic eruption on the territory of modern-day Germany at around the right time. But there's also a probability that a space object struck the planet during this period too. And now let's get back to the hole scientists found in Greenland. When NASA's Ice Bridge program and Germany's Alfred Wegener Institute discovered it, it seemed they had finally found the reason for the Younger Dryas event. But was it really an asteroid that created that impressive pit and caused temperatures to drop all over the Northern Hemisphere? To test this theory, the researchers needed quartz. The thing is, in its pure form, quartz has a very simple structure. It's made from interlocking silicon-oxygen tetrahedra. Efficient and so pretty. Just look at these six-sided prismatic crystals. Since its structure is so simple and the components are so common, you can find quartz almost in any rock on the planet. At one point, magic happens. Larger rocks erode away, pushing out tiny bits of quartz sand. The scientists exploring the mysterious pit gathered the quartz sand that had been washed out from underneath the glacier. It was like looking at the rocks at the very bottom of the hole without having to actually get all the way down there. Very handy. So while examining the material, they discovered quartz grains with the telltale signs of terrible catastrophe. They had PDFs all over them. No, I'm not talking about the document format. PDFs stand for planar deformation features, and they look like lines etched into the crystal surface. These lines are a sign that you're holding shocked quartz. It forms under immense pressure, when the internal crystals are pushed out of alignment. But the most exciting thing here is that shocked quartz only appears under the influence of powerful forces, like massive impacts or terrifying explosions. In other words, finding this poor shocked quartz under the Hiawatha Glacier could be much needed proof that the hole was an enormous impact crater that formed when something equally enormous crash-landed there. Based on the size of the crater, this space object probably was a bit more than a mile across, which is twice the height of the Burj Khalifa Tower in Dubai. A meteorite that big would have looked 3 times as bright as the sun when traveling across the sky, and it would have hit Earth with an immense force. The impact would have been so great it'd have vaporized rock and thrown debris for hundreds of miles away. The sky would have filled with dust. It would have dimmed the sun and led to a temperature drop all over the planet. And guess what? The last part about decreasing temperatures got the researchers super excited, because it opened up a possibility that the impact could have been connected to the Younger Dryas event. To prove this idea, scientists decided to use quartz again. They examined it more closely, trying to date the impact. Well, they were in for an even greater shock. The Hiawatha crater turned out to be not 12,000, but 58 million years old. On the other hand, the researchers were disappointed that they hadn't been able to confirm their theory. The crater couldn't explain the Younger Dryas cold snap, but on the other hand, it was still an amazing discovery. Now, get ready for one final twist to this story, and it revolves around quartz again. Other scientists have recently discovered more deposits of shocked quartz all over what is now the eastern USA. It was hiding in sediment layers dating to just before the Younger Dryas. Interestingly, there aren't any craters around those sites whatsoever. But quartz can't lie. It provides evidence of a powerful explosion. It makes scientists think that their impact hypothesis might still be true, but instead of a collision, it could be an airburst. A massive comet could have broken up while entering Earth's atmosphere around 12,000 years ago, and the fragments could have exploded before reaching the ground. It would have caused catastrophic mass burning throughout the North American continent and messed with the climate so much that the Younger Dryas would have been triggered. Well, I guess we need to wait a bit longer for scientists to find some further proof of this hypothesis. But it doesn't mean we don't have any more curious phenomena to explore in Greenland. Take these fascinating holes. They sure are kinda smaller than the monster we were talking about. They're called moulins, and they carry surface meltwater all the way down to the base of the Greenland ice sheet. And they have prepared some surprises for us too. Apparently, they're way larger than we previously thought. That's what a recent study based on observation and first-hand exploration claims. Even more interesting, this high volume might influence the stability of the ginormous ice sheet in question, as well as the speed at which it's sliding towards the sea. Researchers think that increased water depth and pressure inside moulins might lubricate the base of the ice sheet, making it move faster. You know, the way an ice cube slides more easily on a thin film of melted water. Until recently, we knew too little about the real size of moulins and how much water they can hold. But now, we know that moulins can be giant. The team made 2 trips to the Greenland ice sheet in 2018 and 2019. And during each of them, they used ropes and climbing equipment to drop around 330 feet into 2 separate moulins, almost touching the water's surface. Those who did it described the experience as intimidating. Picture this. Your back is over the edge. All you see is bluish ice going down and blurring into blackness. And the only thing you hear is occasional sounds of crashing ice. It must be extremely unnerving.
And we have liftoff. This is Mars Global Surveyor as America begins its journey back to the Red Planet.
There's a weird structure on Mars, a square, a near-perfect square standing alone in the endless red desert. And it looks too perfect, too precise to be anything but artificial. Nature's chaotic, and it rarely makes things look so deliberate. So the internet took one look at it and lost its mind, as the internet tends to do. The image spread like a virus on social media, igniting every conspiracy theory you can think of. Some were convinced it was proof that intelligent life had once tread upon the Martian sands. Well, let's dive in and sort it out. The image is real, and it's really old. The thing, not the picture. NASA's Mars Orbiter camera snapped it in 2001, capturing a tiny slice of Martian terrain, and there sat the square. Now, is that evidence for intelligent life? Well, Mars is an empty world now, a rust-colored desert. But once, long ago, it may have been something else entirely. A planet filled with roaring rivers, vast oceans, and thick clouds rolling across the sky. Now, in a world like that, life, if it ever had a chance, could have taken root. And there's a possibility it did. Scientists think that life could have existed on Mars in a short period from around 4.1 to 3 billion years ago. It could have started during the early era of Martian history, called the Noachian period, and lasted all the way to the late Hesperian period. Meanwhile, here on Earth, the first oceans were just forming. Life on our planet was just beginning, in the form of tiny bacteria in deep-sea hydrothermal vents. While Mars was already fully wet, on Earth, there were no plants or animals, just microscopic life trying to survive. So, Mars took the lead in the life game. It had a much thicker atmosphere, which could have trapped enough heat to keep water liquid. Valley networks, huge traces across the red landscape, show us the incredible story of rainfall, rivers, and lakes. Huge asteroids were still hitting Mars at the time, and they could have brought organic molecules with them. But if that's true, what happened and where did life go? A recent NASA study suggests that the answer is more complicated than we thought. Astronomers believe that something drastic happened to Mars, like boom, and its cozy climate was gone, its atmosphere thinned. Without a strong magnetic field like Earth's to protect it, solar radiation stripped away the air, leaving Mars cold and dry. The ocean simply evaporated. Some of the water escaped into space while the rest froze underground or became locked in polar ice caps. Today, all that remains is a ghostly memory, dry channels and salty mineral deposits. But it looks like the transition wasn't sudden at all. It was slow and gradual. The planet was changing from wet and warm to cold and dry over millions of years. In fact, Mars kept its ocean even after the temperatures dropped to freezing. Some parts of Mars, especially the northern lowlands, might have remained wet for many, many centuries. Shouldn't the water freeze when it gets below 32 degrees Fahrenheit? Well, yeah. But there are many reasons why this miracle happened, like Mars's thick atmosphere and warm water traveling through currents. And during that time we mentioned before, from Noachian to the late Hesperian, life could have found a way. Microbes on Earth thrive in some of the harshest places, beneath Antarctic ice, in deep sea vents, in toxic volcanic lakes. Hey, life doesn't care. So these times in Martian history would be amazing for it. But don't be mistaken, Mars was never a paradise. Even during its cozy times, it wasn't as lush and green as we might imagine. In its early days, Mars was something more extreme, something closer to the young Earth. During the Noachian period, it was warm yet wet. Then, the climate shifted into the Hesperian period. Oceans were stretching across the northern lowlands. Temperatures dropped, and snow piled high, forming massive glaciers in the south, transforming the planet into an icy world. Finding microscopic life at that time is possible, but an intelligent civilization? That's less likely. The square that went viral isn't evidence for intelligent life yet, and here's why. First things first, people freak out because nature doesn't make straight lines. But that's not really true. Actually, nature does it all the time. For example, here on Earth, we have the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, a beautiful field of hexagonal basalt columns. These are completely natural. They're formed by volcanic activity. There's also the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Hey, remember it from the Close Encounters movie in the 80s? That's a symmetrical rock formation, and it was created by erosion. However, if we looked at these things from space, they'd look artificial. So, what is the square? How about a fracture pattern in the rock or some terrain that's broken apart along straight lines due to stress? This happens on Earth all the time when rock expands and contracts over time. And on Mars, the surface is just constantly battered by meteors, winds, and extreme temperature shifts. No wonder rock would get stressed. What happens here is another case of pareidolia. It's our brain's favorite thing, to spot patterns in something random. Hey, we evolved like this. So sometimes we might look at natural objects and see insane stuff, faces on trees, animals in clouds, shapes, and so on. Besides, NASA has been photographing Mars for decades. We have high-resolution images of craters, mountains, valleys, riverbeds, everything. Wouldn't an ancient civilization leave us, well, something better than some square-like rock? Even though things erode over time, we'd find more signs, roads, foundations, artifacts, ruins, or at least something. Though, to be fair, we do see something. The square wouldn't be the first time Mars has played tricks on us. Over the years, we've spotted everything from tunnels to carved faces, even Bigfoot. Or this doorway, for example, a perfectly cut rectangular opening. That's what people saw when NASA's Curiosity rover sent back an image of the East Cliffs on Mount Sharp. It's almost like an ancient passage leading deep into the surface. You just need to go in and find some fantastic underground base. Well, NASA decided to take a closer look at it. It turns out it's just 12 inches tall and 16 inches wide, the size of a dog door. That's because what we're looking at isn't a doorway, but an open fracture, a break in the rock that happens naturally over time. These kinds of cracks are extremely common, both on Earth and on Mars. They form when bedrock is stressed, expands, contracts, or gets eroded by wind and time. If you walk through a desert here on Earth, you'd see plenty of similar shapes. Canyons, cliffs, and even boulders have fractures that, from the right angle, might look like doorways. They're just not getting photographed by NASA. Also, the straightness of lines turns out to be just a trick of perspective. If you zoom out, you'll see that it's just one small break in a much bigger rock formation. Or the infamous Cydonia face. The photo was taken back in 1976 by NASA's Viking 1 orbiter when it was scanning Mars. In the region known as Cydonia, it captured what looked like a massive humanoid face, a rocky formation about 1.2 miles long. And this one face inspired books, documentaries, movies, and podcasts. But when NASA's Viking orbiters first took pictures of Cydonia, the cameras weren't super advanced. The image of the face had a low resolution and made the details fuzzy. NASA's later missions had far better cameras, and when Mars Global Surveyor revisited Cydonia in 2001, the truth was undeniable. The face was just a hill, a lumpy rock formation with ridges and depressions carved by wind and erosion. And in 2006, during another mission, a colored image with insanely high detail was made. No traces of face left there whatsoever. That's another pareidolia trick for you. Now, Mars has plenty of secrets left to uncover, but they will be related to its fascinating history, not some secret ancient civilization. The conclusion is, don't trust everything you see online. Sometimes a mysterious rock is just a rock.
NASA sent a spacecraft right into the sun. It's the fastest human-made object ever, and could cover the distance from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. in just 1 second. The Parker Solar Probe's mission is to study our star's dangerous behavior. Scientists warn that massive solar storms are inevitable, and the consequences could be catastrophic for our planet. The spacecraft got 7 times closer to the Sun than any other probe ever did. It managed to do so during its 20-second flyby to the star since its launch in 2018. Because our star is so massive, its gravity is really strong, like a giant magnet. As the probe flies around the Sun, it uses gravity to go faster and faster and eventually picks up that crazy speed. As it got closer and closer to the Sun's corona, which is its outer atmosphere, the probe had to survive temperatures of 2,552 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt many metals. It was protected from that heat and radiation by a 4.5-inch thick carbon shield. It kept the tools inside the probe safe and running at around room temperature. The scientists went to all this effort because they're hoping to solve a big mystery about the Sun that's been puzzling them for ages. The surface of our main star is already super hot, but as you move closer out to the corona, the temperature shoots up to millions of degrees. And it doesn't make any sense because it's farther away from the sun. So maybe we could finally get some answers about this heat phenomenon. The mission is also going to help us understand something called solar wind. The sun is constantly shooting out tiny bits of energy and charged particles into space, like a never-ending breeze of electricity. When this solar wind hits Earth, it can create amazing light shows in the sky called auroras. The more active the sun is, the farther south you can see auroras. Our star follows natural cycles that last about 11 years. The activity goes from low to high and back down to low. Right now, we're in the solar maximum, the peak of the activity cycle. That's why we've spotted beautiful auroras in the most unexpected places in 2024. The downside to it is that the sun's activity can send out bursts of energy and charged particles that can mess up things like radios, satellites, and even GPS. It can be dangerous, especially for astronauts out in space who aren't as protected as we are here on Earth. Humans wouldn't feel the compression of the planet's electromagnetic field because of all the extra radiation, but power grids are really sensitive to it. If we don't act fast when it happens, the influx of energy will go into power transformers all over the world, disrupt them, and leave big areas without electricity. If this happens during a hurricane or a tornado, when communication is already super important, it could make it much harder for emergency services to communicate and save lives. That's why it's so important to learn to predict this space weather. It's tricky because, unlike most disasters, like earthquakes, floods, and volcanoes, it doesn't leave behind any kind of physical evidence. The only big solar storms we really know about happened in 1859 and 1921. The first one, called the Carrington Event, was so wild that it made sparks fly from telegraph wires. The auroras were seen all the way near the equator. Scientists back then were using a special kind of paper that reacted to light to record solar activity. During the Carrington Event, the reading from the sun went off the page, literally. Whatever was happening, it was so extreme that we still don't fully understand it. Then, there was the New York Railroad Storm of 1921. It was powerful enough to knock out telegraph systems across the US, Europe, and the Southern Hemisphere. The storm boosted radio transmissions for a bit, making them travel farther than usual. But back then, there weren't nearly as many radios, so it wasn't super helpful. The bigger problem was the electrical grid in the US, which was heavily damaged. Back in 1859 and 1921, people weren't as dependent on tech as we are now. If a storm like that hits today, the consequences could be way more catastrophic. Scientists from New Zealand who study space weather are working on simulations trying to prevent disasters from happening. They say one of the possible options to do it is to study other suns like ours elsewhere in space. If we get data from thousands of stars, not just one, the picture for analysis would be more complete. So far, scientists have launched or plan to launch several other missions in addition to the Parker Solar Probe. Meanwhile, NASA is working on another mission, launching Endurance, robotic moon machinery on steroids. Its main mission will be to collect samples from key lunar locations that will later be retrieved by astronauts from the Artemis program. These samples are spread across the largest impact basin on the moon, separated by hundreds of miles. To do it, Endurance will have to be way more advanced than Perseverance, NASA's current most cutting-edge rover. Endurance will drive roughly 100 times further, drive 10 times faster, and collect roughly 200 times more sample mass. Endurance would also be the first planetary rover to drive at night. And because it will be on the far side of the moon with limited communication to Earth and surface data, it will have to drive autonomously between sample locks and make its own decisions in tough conditions. When it reaches its destination, it's going to switch to a more classic way of doing things. Scientists back on Earth will get involved directly, guiding the rover to explore the sites and collect samples. The teams on Earth will also keep an eye on how the rover is doing by monitoring its telemetry. which is the data it sends back, like its health stats. If they spot any signs that a part is wearing out or something isn't working quite right, they'll tweak the plan to keep things running smoothly. All this will cost huge amounts of money, probably way more than the Viper moon mission that was cancelled after NASA had spent around $450 million on it. While Endurance is in the planning stage, the Blue Ghost lunar lander is already on its way to the moon. Its main mission is research. It will spend 25 days in Earth's orbit, taking measurements and waiting for the right time to fling itself to the moon. After 4 days in transit, Blue Ghost will hang out in lunar orbit for another 16 days to collect more data. Then it will descend to one of the largest basins on the moon and spend 1 lunar day there. It will measure subsurface thermal data, radiation levels, and other important data. At the end of its mission, Blue Ghost will take some final pictures of the lunar sunset. It isn't designed to return back to our planet, so when the night falls, it will do some final work and go offline for good. NASA chose the team of University of Florida aerospace engineers to work on another innovative space project. It will cost $12 million, and its goal will be to improve the way we track changes in tectonic plates and oceans on Earth from space. It will use state-of-the-art sensors that will measure even the tiniest gravitational changes. The data it gets will help scientists monitor droughts, assess groundwater reserves, and better understand changes in sea levels. They expect to launch it around 2027 aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket.
We all know that space missions come with a hefty price tag. To break it down, a ticket to space for an astronaut starts at around $20 million and can soar up to $50 million. NASA may be a well-funded organization, but you can bet they're always on the lookout to cut costs and save millions wherever they can. Plus, NASA has long realized they do not need to go to Saturn's moon to study if there's life there. We already have the suitable conditions for extraterrestrial life in Wyoming. If that resonates with you, then you already understand why NASA is so interested in Yellowstone. To explore life beyond Earth, we need to study environments that mimic extraterrestrial conditions. That's where all those hot springs come into play. Now, it's not the entire park that piques NASA's interest. Let's leave the bears, moose, and other Earthlings to our local biologists. The real hotspot is the geysers, where microbial life flourishes. Oh, by the way, Yellowstone has more geysers and hot springs than the rest of the world combined. In some of them, water can reach temperatures as high as 192 degrees Fahrenheit. You might think, hey, that's only good for steeping tea. But here's the thing. Life in the form of microbes not only survives but thrives in these extreme conditions, having adapted specifically to them. So, could these microbes help us find life on other planets? Absolutely. Now, let's shine the spotlight on the real superstar, the Grand Prismatic Spring. It's packed with silica, which gives it that stunning color. Silica reflects sunlight, especially the blue wavelengths, which is why it looks so vibrant. The coolest part, though, is not the color, but the fact that this spring can teach us a lot about how life evolved. Way back around 4.5 billion years ago, I wasn't around then, living things didn't know how to harness energy from sunlight yet, so they were using chemical processes instead, just like they do now at the Grand Prismatic Spring. But why are we talking about other planets? Well, if life on Earth kicked off in a comparable way to what we see in Yellowstone, there's a good chance we could find something similar elsewhere in the universe. And if we could nail down exactly how life started here, we could really fine-tune our search for life on other planets. Geysers, very similar to those in Yellowstone, can be found on moons like Enceladus, which orbits Saturn, and Triton, which is a moon of Neptune. But how do they compare to the geysers we see in Yellowstone? Well, back in 1989, NASA's Voyager 2 spacecraft made a groundbreaking discovery when it spotted geysers on Triton. This was the first time anyone had seen a geyser outside of Earth, not counting the volcanic eruptions on Jupiter's moon, Io, that were found by Voyager 1 in 1979. Since then, more geysers have been found on other moons in our solar system. In Yellowstone, geysers are heated by hot water from deep within the Earth. However, geysers on some of the outer moons get their heat from tidal forces, the gravitational pull from the big planets they orbit. You know how ocean tides on Earth are affected by the moon and the sun? Well, these moons experience something similar, but on a much larger scale. Beneath the icy surfaces of these moons are warm, salty oceans that stay liquid because the thick ice above keeps them insulated. As the moons move closer and further from their parent planets, the constant tugging creates heat, causing the warm water below to shoot out into space whenever there's a crack in the ice. This icy crust and the warm water underneath are a bit like a frozen pond on Earth. But could there be life swimming around in these hidden oceans, just like there are critters thriving beneath the ice of a pond? That's something scientists want to find out. NASA hopes to send advanced spacecraft to explore these distant moons and look for signs of life. But those warm oceans are buried miles beneath the frozen surface. So, how do we reach them? The answer may lie in geysers. In February 2019, a group of planetary scientists decided to visit Yellowstone in the winter to study the similarities between Earth's geysers and those in space. They know that Yellowstone's geysers are home to some tough little microbes called extremophiles, which thrive in extreme conditions like hot or acidic water. The researchers wanted to learn as much as they could about these microbes and the environments they live in. They brought along a bunch of scientific tools to measure things like temperature, pH levels, and oxygen in the water. They also used special instruments to analyze the chemicals in the ice and rocks and sniff the air for gases. Plus, they collected samples of rock, ice, and water from the geysers, catching tiny droplets on sheets of foil coated in geyser spray. Their main target was the Great Fountain Geyser in Yellowstone's Midway Geyser Basin, which puts on a spectacular show 2 to 3 times a day. However, visiting in winter posed some challenges. Some scientists were delayed by snowy weather, arriving late at night right before they were supposed to enter the park. Then their SUV got stuck in a snowdrift and had to be rescued by a snowplow. The next day, riding in a snow coach, the team had to trudge through deep snow for nearly a mile to reach the geyser, keeping an eye out for elk, bison, and even bears. As they made their way to the Great Fountain Geyser, they took breaks to gather samples and measurements from other interesting pools along the way, like Lemon Pool and Surprise Pool. Even though Yellowstone feels remote, it's not nearly as far away as places like Enceladus and Triton. It's a unique natural laboratory that can teach us a lot about life on Earth and potentially beyond. Oh, as for labs, the Great Prismatic Spring may count as one. Look at these guys. Under the microscope, they look like matches. Their official Latin name is Thermus aquaticus. They live in this hot spring, and these bacteria have saved millions of people's lives. Now, if you're skeptical about what I just said, then you need to know that these bacteria help to create the basis of PCR tests widely used in today's medicine to give fast and precise diagnosis. Back in the 60s, a microbiologist named Thomas Brock was exploring the park's superheated thermal pools and stumbled upon something amazing. Brock was super interested in bacteria that could thrive in extreme conditions. During his 10-year journey studying geysers and thermal springs, he found a microbe in a spring called Mushroom Pool that could survive in nearly boiling water. This little guy, Thermus aquaticus, turned out to be a game changer for science. Why? Well, it's crucial for a technique called PCR, also known as polymerase chain reaction, which is used to quickly make copies of DNA samples. Before Brock's discovery, this process was tricky because the heat could damage the enzymes that hold DNA together. But thanks to Thermus aquaticus, scientists could now heat and cool DNA samples without breaking them down, making everything faster and easier. It all happened because researchers had purified an enzyme called TAG polymerase out of this organism. Those Yellowstone microbes could also be your new go-to for a delicious and sustainable breakfast. A unique microbe was discovered there during some NASA-funded research. and it's now being transformed into tasty vegan breakfast patties and cream cheese. Originally found in a hot spring, this little wonder is called Fusarium strange flavolapsus, and it caught the attention of space enthusiasts as a powerful protein source for long space missions. Plus, it requires way less water and land than beef, making it a smart choice for the planet. Researchers initially looked at this microbe for biofuel, but soon realized it could be cultivated into a complete protein with a texture reminiscent of chicken. Marked as FY, it can be turned into a variety of food products, all thanks to a fermentation process that keeps it free from contaminants. Oh, almost forgot. NASA is even working on a bioreactor to grow FY in space. Ooh, stay tuned.
NASA has recently revealed some eerie cosmic sounds that go against the popular misconception about the muteness of space. This discovery proves once again that the universe is far from silent. The revelation came from the Perseus galaxy cluster, located 250 million light-years away from Earth. There, NASA uncovered an unworldly howling coming from the supermassive black hole at its center. This discovery isn't super fresh. It was made in 2003. It marked the first time scientists detected an acoustic phenomenon from such a distant source. Sadly, the sound was not something you would be able to hear. Its frequency was just too low for the human ear to register. The lowest pitch the human ear can perceive is 20 Hz, 20 cycles per second. But the sound emitted by the black hole is a B-flat, 57 octaves below middle C, with a frequency of 10 million years. But NASA brought it to the realm of human hearing in 2022, turning that invisible sound into something you could actually experience. It was a breakthrough of cosmic proportions when NASA revealed that sound waves could travel through space, specifically through the medium of the Perseus galaxy cluster. This medium is a hot, dense gas, something far more substantial than the empty vacuum between galaxies. That's how sound waves manage to travel there. Those sound waves produced by the supermassive black hole at the center of Perseus resonate through the hot gas as ripples. It's like how sound travels through water here on Earth. The thing is, space is indeed a vacuum, which means that sound cannot travel through it, in the traditional sense. But the gas surrounding the black hole in Perseus provided the perfect environment for sound to travel. The black hole's powerful jets create ripples, sending vibrations through the gas. And NASA scientists have identified those vibrations as a type of cosmic sound. Previously, it was totally invisible and unhearable, but now, for the first time, astronomers have helped it to take a form humans can hear. To give us a sense of how deep this sound is, NASA raised its pitch by 57 octaves so that it could finally be audible to the human ear. The result is a haunting, bass-heavy hum. It feels as though it is resonating from the very core of space itself. What NASA did is called sonification. This process involves mapping the characteristics of the data to audible sound. As a result, we can experience something that is otherwise beyond our perception. See those brighter areas of the cluster? They produce louder and higher-pitched tones. The sonification of the Perseus black hole isn't just a scientific discovery. It has allowed us to see, or should I say, hear, the universe in a completely different way. NASA has used this technique on several different space objects, including stars, nebulae, and galaxies, giving us a glimpse into the various ways space can sound. One of the coolest NASA's sonifications is Cassiopeia A. It's the remains of a star spotted as a supernova more than 300 years ago. Located around 10,000 light-years away from Earth, this shattered remnant of a once massive star has a neutron star at its core. and it's the youngest neutron star in our galaxy that we know about. To perform the sonification of Cassiopeia A, NASA took the data captured by the Chandra X-ray Observatory and translated it into sound. Starting at the center, a triangle-shaped tone marks the location of the neutron star. Then, the sound spreads outward, which represents the expanding debris field. That's when the pitch rises and the tones become brighter. The sound grows louder and seems to mirror the outbursts of the supernova and the formation of new elements. The Tarantula Nebula, located in the Large Magellanic Cloud, is a hotbed of star formation and one of the most active regions in the universe. Astronomers have been studying this nebula for a long time to learn more about how stars are born and evolve. So, no wonder that NASA scientists have been doing their best to translate the data from the nebula into sound. They've been mapping brightness and pitch to various features in the nebula. So, airy, synthesizer-like tones represent the chaotic and hot gases surrounding the most massive stars. And the cooler gases that are forming new stars have soft, low notes. Piano-like tones correspond to the brightest stars. And the central cluster of stars sounds like a rain stick. Interestingly, NASA's investigation into the sounds of space doesn't just involve cosmic phenomena. It's also based on the experiences of astronauts, and some of them are truly eerie. After all, space exploration is always filled with unexpected surprises, and sometimes those surprises come in the form of strange noises aboard spacecraft. One such incident occurred aboard the International Space Station, when astronaut Butch Wilmore reported hearing a strange noise coming from Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. By that time, this spaceship had been docked at the station for almost 3 months. The Starliner had just completed an 8-day mission that went awry. The technical issues have been plaguing the spacecraft ever since. Wilmore described the sound as a pulsing noise, similar to a sonar ping. It was coming through the spacecraft's speaker system. This strange noise made Wilmore contact NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. Of course, Mission Control immediately began investigating. They were able to listen to the audio inside the Starliner. Wilmore even held his microphone up to the speaker so that NASA could hear it more clearly. The people in charge of the investigation finally identified the source of the noise. They announced there was an audio configuration issue with the ISS's complex communication system. The thing is, this system connects numerous spacecraft and modules, and such configurations can sometimes lead to strange noises. NASA reassured everyone that such an issue wasn't really unusual. At the same time, they encourage astronauts to report any unexpected sounds they come across. At the same time, this incident was just another proof of how tricky it is to maintain advanced spacecraft systems in orbit. The Starliner had already faced serious delays and setbacks, and every new issue added extra pressure. Everyone was worried about the spacecraft's safe return to Earth. In any case, it's not the only incident involving eerie space sounds. In 1969, during the Apollo 10 mission, astronauts heard something truly bizarre while orbiting the Moon. Now, Apollo 10 was a dry run for the historic Apollo 11 moon landing. This mission involved astronauts Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan. They were testing the systems of the lunar module. Everything was going smoothly, and then they started passing behind the Moon. In that region, radio signals from Earth couldn't reach them. At that point, they all started hearing a strange, high-pitched whistling sound. It was coming through their headsets. The origin of this noise baffled the astronauts since it wasn't supposed to exist in the near vacuum of space. At first, they simply joked that it sounded like outer space music, But in reality, the situation was quite unnerving. The astronauts were on the dark side of the moon, far away from Earth and any help. And now there was also that eerie, mysterious sound they couldn't explain. At the same time, NASA was super worried about astronauts' health and mental condition. So the crew didn't immediately report the noise to Mission Control. But after they returned to Earth, NASA engineers thoroughly investigated the phenomenon. They came to the conclusion that the sound had most likely come from the spacecraft's communications system. The reason could be the unusual circumstances of the mission. After all, the spacecraft was kinda cut off Earth. The moon was between it and our planet. Still, even after this extensive analysis, the origin and nature of the whistle is still a great mystery for many people. Anyway, all these new discoveries and old cosmic puzzles prove that the universe is far from silent. It hums, roars, whispers, and reveals the mysteries of the cosmos one note at a time. In the future, as our technological abilities continue to evolve, NASA's work with sonification and its study of strange astronaut experiences will likely lead to even more awesome discoveries. And if we listen more closely, we may find that the universe is much more talkative than we think.
You know what? 8 out of 10 people worldwide can't see the Milky Way anymore. And in just 100 years, it might turn into a forgotten tale from the past. It's not that the galaxy is disappearing, but that the cosmos is fading from view. Back in our grandparents' day, they could look up and see this vibrant tapestry of stars. But nowadays, we're lucky if we can even count them on one hand. This has nothing to do with nature. It's all because of the creeping threat of something called light pollution. Next time you walk around a big city after dark, take a moment to notice the large number of street lights, neon billboards, and office buildings shining all night long. Those endless city lights create an artificial brightness that competes with the natural glow of the stars. This is light pollution, and it's getting worse. Every year, Earth gets 10% brighter. That means if someone is born today in an area where you can typically see around 250 stars, when they reach 18, they'll only be able to see about 100 of them. Unfortunately, that's already a problem in big cities, where looking up at the stars is becoming something that you can only do in planetariums. It's gotten to a point where, during an earthquake that knocked out the power in Los Angeles in the 90s, many residents called emergency centers to report a massive silvery cloud in the night sky. But what they were actually seeing, perhaps for the first time, was the Milky Way. When you look at Earth from space, you can see vast areas of North America, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia all lit up. Singapore, Qatar, and Kuwait are some of the most light-polluted countries. On the flip side, remote places like Siberia, the Sahara, and the Amazon rainforest are in total darkness. Light pollution shows up in many forms. First, there is glare, like when you're driving and those bright lights literally make your eyes hurt, leaving you very uncomfortable. Then there is clutter, like Times Square with its crazy mishmash of different bright lights all over the place. Light trespass is when light sneaks into places it shouldn't, like a streetlight shining right into your bedroom. And finally, there is over-illumination, which is just using way too much artificial light for no good reason, like keeping all the office lights on throughout the night when no one is even there. All these forms of light pollution aren't just stealing the beauty of the night sky, they're also interfering with astronomical studies. When we rely too heavily on artificial lights, it messes up the work of Earth-based telescopes. And when that equipment can't do their job properly, we end up needing even more expensive space telescopes like Hubble and James Webb. And let's face it, that costs us billions. Turning night into day actually affects all of us, not just astronomers. Nighttime light messes with our sleep schedule and our body's internal clock. This clock keeps things like brain activity, hormone levels, and cell functions on track. So when it's disrupted, it can lead to serious issues like depression, insomnia, heart problems, or worse. One key process that gets messed up is the production of melatonin, a hormone that kicks in when it's dark. Too much light at night lowers melatonin levels, leading to stress, anxiety, headaches, and sleep deprivation. Blue light is the main villain here. You might think that turning on night mode and getting that orange glow in your phone screen is enough, but it's not. Blue light is also present in LED bulbs, the kind we use at home and in city lighting, because they're cheap and energy efficient. My point is that blue light is basically everywhere, and it's a real challenge to avoid it completely. This is also a big part of why we're not entirely sure how bad light pollution is nowadays. I mean, some statistics suggest that this issue increased by 49% over 25 years, up to 2017. But the real figure may be even higher. The thing is, blue light has shorter wavelengths, and the satellites we depend on today struggle to detect it accurately, meaning they don't quite capture the full extent of the light pollution caused by LED lights. Animals are lost and confused too. Their sleep patterns are also affected. A study from Germany revealed that blackbirds in urban areas are getting active much earlier than those in natural habitats. They wake up and start singing up to 5 hours sooner than their country cousins. Migration behaviors are messed up, especially for birds like sparrows and thrushes who travel at night. You see, they rely on the moon and stars as their internal GPS. So you can imagine how disoriented they get when they spot something like Las Vegas's massive sphere, lit up by 1.2 million LED bulbs. The intense brightness hides stars and disrupts their navigation across thousands of miles and continents. And it's not just that. Artificial lighting is unfortunately causing more birds to crash into skyscrapers and high-rise buildings. Insects, like mosquitoes, are also affected by light pollution. Yep, they're kind of gross, so it might not bug you if they're attracted to artificial lights and meet their fate. But remember, they're a crucial food source for many animals, like bats or frogs, so disrupting their populations could throw off entire food chains. Nighttime lights are causing problems underwater as well. Marine creatures near brightly lit panels off the Welsh coast are changing their behaviors, and fewer sea squirts and sea bristles are hanging out near those lights. Another example involves sea turtles. They typically lay their eggs on beaches and often return to the same spots for years. But when those beaches are too bright at night, female turtles might become confused and decide not to lay their eggs there. Now, do we really need all this light? It's hard to say. Some people might feel safer at night, while others think the opposite. You see, it's usually the glare that messes up our sight. Here's an example. If there's a super bright lamp blocking our view, say at a gate, we can't see anything but the light. But check this out. If we partially cover the light with our hands, suddenly we can spot an intruder. Wow. What I mean is that more lamps don't always mean more safety. It's all about using them the right way, and doing things like dimming lights can actually enhance security. Plus, it could save you some cash. Speaking of which, light waste has a pretty big impact on the economy. Take a Cobra Head streetlight, for instance. The light projected directly by it is only 30% of the total light it emits. In the US alone, roughly 1/3 of the light at night goes to waste, and that adds up to a staggering annual cost of $2.2 billion. Electric lights aren't all bad, of course. They have done some good stuff for us, like making our days longer so we can get more done and have some fun after work. But we can totally minimize this issue. Turning off all the lights would be awesome, but let's be real, that is very difficult, if not impossible these days. So, what can we do? Get those fancy controls like dimmers, timers, and motion sensors to make sure our lights are super efficient. Go for warmer colored lamps instead of those harsh blue ones. Oh, and consider using fully shielded light fixtures, like those cool vintage table lamps. They direct the light down where you need it, so you don't get that annoying glare or light scattering everywhere. Plus, when you cut down on wasted light, you're not just helping out the planet, you're also saving some cash on your electric bill. Talk about a win-win. It looks like a regular beach, but something sets off an alarm blaring in your head. The sand looks too red, the sun is too bright, the wind is all wrong, it's hard to breathe, and there's no water in the ocean. Well, panic not, it's normal, since you're on Mars. For the longest time, we've seen Mars as a dry, lifeless dust ball, a freezing desert where water exists only as ice or vapor. But new research suggests that billions of years ago, it was a totally different place. And instead of endless dust, it may have had something much more familiar to us: sunny, sandy beaches. Scientists from Penn State, UC Berkeley, and Guangzhou University studied radar data from China's Zhurong rover. It started to roll across Mars in 2021. While exploring the surface of the red planet, it found sloping rock formations that looked strikingly similar to the ones found on Earth's coastlines. Those are called foreshore deposits. They form when waves push sand onto a shoreline. But Zhurong wasn't just taking pretty pictures. It also had ground-penetrating radar, a tool that allowed it to scan deep below the Martian surface as it traveled 1.2 miles between May 2021 and May 2022. And it found something pretty wild: layers of sediment sloping down at a 15-degree angle. This pattern is identical to the ones left behind by waves on Earth. And this wasn't from the wind, volcanoes, or anything else. It just looked like a real beach. And that's actually a big deal. Because if there were waves and tides, there must have been a large body of water. That means Mars may have once had just the right conditions for hosting life. Even after 3.5 billion years, the formations are still incredibly similar to beaches on Earth. So there must have been a time when Mars was much more than just a dusty rock in space. After revealing this shocking news, Zhurong's radar scanned 260 feet deep into the ground, discovering sediment layers. They once formed along a path perpendicular to an ancient shoreline, the one that likely existed 4 billion years ago. At the same time, it might not be all that surprising. Back then, Mars wasn't the dry, frozen wasteland we see today. It had a thicker atmosphere, a warmer climate, and plenty of liquid water. And I'm not even talking about some tiny puddle. Beaches don't form without a massive body of water. For waves to shape the land like this, there had to be rivers flowing into a vast ocean. Powerful currents had to be moving sand around, and water had to stick around for a long time. This couldn't be just a brief wet spell. It was a period where Mars was hydrologically active for millions of years, potentially being a place where life could have thrived. This discovery gives even more weight to one theory. It has been puzzling scientists since the 1970s. That's when NASA's Viking spacecraft snapped images of what looked like a shoreline wrapping around Mars's northern hemisphere. But there was a problem. The shoreline was all over the place, with elevations varying by up to 6 miles. Wow, which is nothing like our flat, mostly consistent shorelines we see on Earth. This difference made scientists doubt that a Martian ocean ever existed. For years, scientists have been trying to crack this mystery. In 2007, they suggested that Mars' rotation actually shifted billions of years ago. As the planet's massive Tharsis volcanic region grew, the planet's spin axis tilted, warping the surface. It could explain why the shoreline is so uneven today. In other words, what once was a flat and level landscape got distorted over time. Interestingly, Mars has been dropping hints about its watery past for years. Curiosity found ancient ripples in Gale Crater. There were signs of a long-gone lake. Perseverance is currently studying a fossilized river delta in Jezero Crater. Now, with Zhurong's evidence of an ancient ocean, it all comes together. Small lakes? Check. Rivers? Check. A massive ocean covering the northern lowlands? Quite possibly. Zhurong's mission wrapped up in May 2022 after dust blocked its solar panels. But future missions could still explore those ancient shoreline deposits. Scientists might send new missions to drill deeper into the ground to retrieve samples. Or we could use better radar to map Mars' subsurface in more detail. There's a real hope to excavate those areas in the future and find even more clues about Mars' past. At the same time, NASA's Perseverance rover is already working hard in Jezero Crater collecting samples. Scientists hope that it will bring them back to Earth in the 2030s. While those won't include samples from the ancient ocean, they could still help us find out more about Mars's wetter history. For now, the discovery of ancient beaches on Mars gives us a peek into a time when the planet might have looked a lot more like Earth, with water, waves, and rivers. Now let's speak about the Perseverance rover that's still working on Mars in more detail. It has a special drill on its arm and uses it to scrape off the dust and top layers of rock, making small 2-inch wide circles in Jezero crater. Once, one of its cameras took a close-up photo, and the image showed that the rock wasn't smooth. It was made of tiny interlocking crystals. The rover used 2 special tools to analyze the rock's chemistry. The results confirmed that the rock, named Rochette, was volcanic. It meant it formed from lava or magma, not from mud and clay, like scientists had expected from a former lake bed. Perseverance, also known as Percy, landed on Mars in February 2021, along with a small helicopter named Ingenuity. It is the most advanced rover ever sent to Mars, following in the footsteps of Curiosity, Spirit, Opportunity, and others. But Percy has a different mission. While older rovers mainly studied Martian rocks and climate, Perseverance is searching for signs of past life. Scientists chose Jezero crater because it looks like it used to be a lake where tiny life forms could have lived. The rover drills, scrapes, and collects rock samples to study with its science tools. It also saves some samples to bring back to Earth in the future for even closer study. Perseverance has found some surprising things on Mars. Scientists studying the data it sent back have discovered that Jezero crater has changed a lot over time. Long ago, this area had flowing lava, a lake that lasted for thousands of years, rivers that carried mud and sand, and even massive floods that brought in rocks from far away. It means that Jezero's history is more active and unpredictable than scientists expected. This definitely made it harder to find the sedimentary rocks they were looking for. But it has also revealed new places where ancient life might have existed. Another exciting discovery is that every rock Perseverance has studied so far contains carbon-based materials, the same stuff that life on Earth is built from. NASA's Perseverance rover also carries a special tool called MOXIE, which has managed to make oxygen from the carbon dioxide in Mars' atmosphere for the first time. Over 16 test runs, MOXIE produced about 4 ounces of oxygen. That's enough to keep an astronaut breathing for about 4 hours. It worked even better than expected, making up to 0.42 ounces of oxygen per hour. After running successfully for 2 years, MOXIE completed its final test in September 2023. It brings us one step closer to sending humans to Mars in the future. In any case, back to the discovery of ancient shorelines on Mars. This finding might help us see the red planet with new eyes. Water might have been flowing across its surface for tens of millions of years, carving out lakes, rivers, and even a vast ocean. What else have we misunderstood? Did Martian dinos stroll across the vast green valleys of the planet? Or were those bizarre marine creatures the likes of which we can't even imagine? Well, we don't know yet, but one thing is very likely. Mars had an era of warmth, water, and maybe life.